Shamblers are a little bit of a slow start. But by cycle 2, he's probably got the board presence, and he's way back up over 50. And then he's just getting free bodies out there.
Hello and welcome to the Forgeborn Finishing School. Kckid and Koar here. We'll be analyzing Forgeborn battles to help take your game to the next level.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're on the eve of the last winter's Kickstarter shipping out. People are starting to get emails, and the sets are shipping. Greg, you and I recently took part in Fuse Fest, so we got to play a couple of the last winter set cards, which was a lot of fun. Everyone in St. Paul. But this week, we're going to break down Nathas Gaming. So world champion Sam Nathas has been putting on an invitational event that basically he ran a bunch of events, and as long as you took part in enough events or placed well enough in a small amount of events, you were able to qualify for the Silver Invitational. Ended up being 21 players. I know there was, I think, a couple more maybe that qualified, couldn't make it. But there's quite a few people that took part in his events, but led up to this silver event, 21 players. Honestly, Greg, I think this is the most competitive Solforge Fusion event we've seen quite some time that's really encompassing the entire meta. And it might be the last Solforge Fusion event that is capturing the meta of set 2 and set 1 without set 3. Now that set 3 is coming out. So excited to break this down. It's been going on for 2-3 weeks now. Started out being run as a kind of a weekly event, and those weeks were shortened, so when all the matches finished up, Sam kicked it off into the next round, and I think we went through 4 rounds in about 2 weeks, maybe a little bit over 2 weeks. So excited to talk about this. Should we jump into it, Greg, or you have anything to share?
No, yeah, let's jump into the top 4 decks. You want to kick us off, as the deck number 4 is yours.
Yeah, so oftentimes we do, just the top 2 decks, but we're kind of slowing down our release schedule, going to 1 month. And of course, we're going to squeeze it into the top 4 because I barely squeaked over the bar into the top 4, and I want to talk about my deck. So I came in here at 4th, had a really good run. You could see in the Swiss, I went 4-0, which, we were talking before the event and kind of surprised our expectations. And that's just because of the strength of the schedule. I mean, the players in this thing, this is top caliber. And so ran in there and then went into the top cut. And I will tell you, I got paired up against Carl. And he's always a solid player. I looked at his deck and I was scared. He was running a Thunder Crash Field kind of deck, and I told him, I said, if those things get out of hand, I'm in trouble. My priority number 1 is to keep a creature with 4 attack in every lane at all times. And I was able to squeak by him on what I think was probably a pretty lucky draw. But yeah, let's break down my deck. And this is Umbruck, which is, red-green Tempest Utera deck. As you'll see in the top 4, this is the only one that is not Dizzian or purple-green. So Tempest squeaks into the top 4, but outside of that, it was just purely purple-green goodness up top, and we'll go through those. This deck, I think when you look at it, it catches a lot of people off guard. And that I would say it caught so many people off guard. Even when I was playing, most players had no idea which Forgeborn I was going to run. And most people were under the assumption that I would run Sunder, which this deck was not running Sunder. I have ran this exact pairing with Sunder, and it can do pretty well, and it changes the dynamic of the deck quite a bit. But most people pick out right away, it is a Mantis Forge Sealed deck. So then they go to the Forgeborn and they instantly go, okay, where is he going to get a lot of procs? And most people would see, okay, 2 spell sprites. So with Forge Seal, Mantis, and your normal proc, that's 6 free bodies you're kind of giving up. That's why everyone would generally jump to that. And it works pretty well. But what I did was Nova. And Greg, we've mentioned this deck a few times. I think throughout past streams, this is what I call the Umbruckian Sling Down. And this is the 3rd iteration of it. So I've iterated on this deck a couple of times, and it's typically changing out the red, the red or the green. I think I've said it on the screen for a while, but this one I call the Legendary Umbruckian Sling Down, simply because the red and this one is the Legends Interpreters. So it was primarily built around the idea of getting Thundersoar out of hand if people left him on the board, but other creatures can fill that role pretty well as additionally. So let's kind of just jump into the reason I bring that Thundersoar up is this Nova's Might. Give your creatures +2/+2. So I'm allowed to do that 3 times throughout the match with the Forge Seal, the Mantis, and the natural proc. And then it jumps into an Oak Father's minion. And so I do get a lot of breakthrough on the board. And what I often tell people is once I get 3 creatures on the board, that's the kind of make or break scenario for going against me. If you allow me to get 3 creatures on the board and keep them there, your chances of winning go down drastically. If you can keep me under 3 creatures, that's when I'm going to lose the match very quickly. Because that's what it does, is it plays with creature stats to keep them on the board longer than they should, to get me above 3, and then when it's above 3, I just keep piling on stats and kind of break through and do the damage. So this green plays in and of itself very well in an isolated pair and can sometimes carry a match by itself with its a little bit of life gain synergy. The Sated Reveler, the Druid's Chant, the Forge Seal, if I underdrop it later in cycle 3 with an Oak Father on the board, will get me some life. And then that Primal Surge, Spring Dryad, Stouthide Stegodon. So you see some of those staples in the life gain package. No Glowhive Siren or no Swamp Moss Lurker. That's kind of what holds this green half from being, I would say, astronomical. But it pairs into this red, which is a little bit different. And that's, it's got the Chaining Creature to kind of get those huge swing plays sometimes. And then the Thundersoar, which in this deck, I will throw it out in an empty lane. There's nothing in front of it. That's okay with me. Eventually, it's going to get some stats. Durante Elementalist, this is almost a must play for me in Cycle 1, because Cycle 2 and Cycle 3 in this deck is very, very powerful. My favorite little combo with the Durante Elementalist is the Staff of Varus. Also combos well with the Reveler, being able to give it increased stats and instantly do 3 damage, 3, 5, or 7 looking at it as you go up. Sorry, 3, 5, or 10. So just a lot of little combos here and there. Most people look at this red and go, okay, I see it's good, but it's not great. And I would say they're probably right. It's not great, but it's on the cusp. And the only card that I actually don't love in this deck is the Assailing Giant. This damage straight to the opposing player's health is okay, but on the stat line of this creature at a 4/4, a 6/7, it's not great. The 3rd level is 15/7. I did get it to the 3rd level once in this tournament, which was surprising. That's very rare. This is probably my least preferred card to play in the entire deck. But outside of that, Pyromantic Stonefist as a 3/6, not great, but that 2 damage, that's a toolbox kind of thing to come in and remove a threat that's just been hanging around. So it does pretty well. And then, so we talked about that Thundersoar, and a lot of other creatures, I said, can fill the role. But when you have a Thundersoar on the board, Stone Skin becomes phenomenal removal. Fit of Rage increases its stats. Staff of Varus increases its attack if it needs to. Disintegrate can increase a Thundersoar stats, and I promise you I have done it. It's not always an optimal play, but if it can catch someone off guard and you can do quite a lot of damage, or take a threat off the board that's not expected to be taken off the board, like a Dark Heart, 8 damage. Mm-hmm. Primal Surge increases stats. Pax Blessing increases stats. Forge Seal in this deck with Nova increases stats. Druid's Chant increases stats. So what this deck does, again, I started off, and then I'll pass because I'm probably kind of rambling here, is at every opportunity along the way, I am outstatting your creature to keep my creature on the board, and it snowballs. And in Cycle 2, it snowballs very hard. I think I won 3 of my matches in this tournament, Turn 2, Cycle 2.
Yeah, and when you brought this, you're like, hey, this is what I'm playing. I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, I'm guessing you're playing this really aggressive. And that's where you're catching people by surprise. Because a lot of times you're like, well, I can take a little bit of damage at the start of the game. But against this kind of deck, doing that can put you off really fast. And so once you start hitting a few of those punches, and it's hard to stop those because your guys are so well statted and you're increasing it as you play, right? We can go through the creatures again, but there's just big bodies. I mean, the Arrogant, War Tusk, Stegodon's good. You talked about the Thundersoar, the Venerable Rex is still solid, right? And then the spell suite with the options of hitting off the free spells. And then especially if you're hitting the Forge Seal and Mantis in Cycle 1, and Cycle 2 you're starting to drop 8/8 bodies that are also getting vigor and breakthrough. So
Mm-hmm.
really, really fun deck, and it really, like you said, catches people by surprise. It's very aggressive and very quick.
Yeah, and one thing you cued me in on, I will share probably my favorite play in the tournament. I had a turn one off Forge, so the second play of the match was Sated Reveler here. And so it went to my opponent's turn. I forget the spell they play. It wasn't extremely consequential. I dropped the Pax Blessing to get a 5/5 Wisp on the board, which a lot of times I do love going into Druid's Chant on the Sated because then it instantly procs the additional attack. But this one was a Pax Blessing. So basically a two-body spell. And then it was their turn. They played something. And then my next turn's a Mantis. So I end up with three creatures on the board. One of them's a 7/7, one of them's a 6/7, one of them's a 3/3 with armor. That's a very, very hard thing for a lot of decks to come back from because then I'm going on Forge the next turn and screaming forward. So, yeah, a lot of fun. So this is, the legendary Umbruckian Sling Down, I like to call it. It's kind of a beatdown spell slinging deck. So a lot of fun. I think we're going to jump forward into Ben's deck, who ended up getting third with his deck named the Blood Posse, Greg.
Yeah, so taking a look at this, and I don't know if he ended up running the Nyx or the Nova. I'm leaning towards the Nyx, just because looking at the deck and what it's trying to do. But the big takeaway here is got triple Shambler, right? So that's going to be a big part of the deck. It's looking at getting shambling guys on the board, and then it's just getting bodies that it can weather the storm to start trading damage. Not necessarily trading damage, but life gain essentially, or life steal. So Cutthroat's just a great keyword. So it's got removal in there. Hibernating Demon is still just a big body that gets bigger. So hibernating with the 5/8, so
that's out of hand.
Good card. Scourge Hider again, removal, and then looking at some of the abilities, some of the other things. Shambling obviously is gaining life, right? He's got the Glow Hives gaining life. Mystical Mantis is putting body on the board. He's got the Swamp Moss Lurker, which is a free body. Especially in this deck, he's probably fairly consistent getting it off. And then he's got good spells. Om Nom Nom, Epidemic can be good, especially if he's putting out some minions and stuff and killing himself, and then also hurting his opponent, and then getting all the shambles. Botanimate, Druid's Chant works really well with Swamp Blast Lurker if he needs to get it out. Lead the Charge is probably not as good in this deck, though it could trigger off of, I suppose, the Mantis, and Vine Lash is always a good spell. So my guess is using the Nyx Nikaya just for the Soul Root and Army of the Damned for the minions, and then using the Mantis to pull those back out. Though could have been the Nova. I think if he was planning on making it into the cycle 5 with the Nova's Might, otherwise the Nova's Rat's not that great. Nova's Touch can be useful, so get some more removal in there, but I'm guessing the 6/6 bodies to go with that shambling pair. So again, I think this deck is looking at just putting bodies on the board and getting the shambling triggers to go off, and just slowly over the course of the game, swapping those hit points from your opponent to yourself as you take them out. And then of course the Shambling Necromancer. I mean, it's one of the better keywords in the Shambling or Forges, and then you're also getting the Necromancer body, which is huge as well. What are your thoughts on it, Ryan?
Yeah, I broke it down pretty well. I will say, when you mentioned Lead the Charge, I think its prime target outside of Mantis is the level 3 Necro.
Yeah.
Probably just extend its life on the board and pop another thing out. Pretty powerful. And then the Swamp Moss Lurker, this is one of those interesting decks that it may be more likely that he gets it free in Cycle 2. Not even playing it at all in Cycle 1. Because someone might just punch you below 50 in this deck, right? That's probably... Shamblers are a little bit of a slow start. But by Cycle 2, he's probably got the board presence, and he's way back up over 50. And then he's just getting free bodies out there, which I think is really interesting. And then... yeah. The Indomitable Fiend plays pretty decently into the Nyx, plays really well into the Cutthroat Shambler, plays really well into the Zithian Dreadmaw, and the Scourge Hydra. So there's a little bit
Mhm.
of destruction synergy kind of hiding under there that I do love to see. And then who doesn't love a Basher? Just really cool stuff all across the board. And yeah, Ben's a phenomenal player. Um, yeah, I love that Cutthroat on there. So
Cutthroat, the Shambling Necromancer, is in the Cutthroat. So it's just, again, you're seeing. We'll see it with the rest of these decks as well. When you're got the Dizzy combo here, you got just good creatures. You're getting the life steal, the life gain, which is going to allow you to make that game go longer when you need it to, while punishing your opponent at the same time, which is huge. So, and then having access to triple shambling just gives you a lot of consistency. So,
I love how this deck he named it the Blood Posse. That comes with half of it's named the Blood Chancellors, half it's named the Posse of Tetra Rain. But like a three Shambler deck, the Blood Posse, everything checks out. And then talking about Shamblers and an overstated demon, Greg, I think you're going to break down the second place player's deck for us. Aaron, um, he's got a Shambler in there. I played against Aaron that had me like having nightmares that I was scared of the entire time. So go ahead.
we'll go to the shambling demon. So again, this deck here again, we got two shambling creatures on there, and we're going to see that be very effective. I've been looking for a green deck similar to this. I mean, this is Aaron, so might be on sale on the GVG sale at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a 4/7 shambling creature on first cycle. That's tough to get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shambling Geist gets really big in second and third cycle. Along with that, Demon is getting still pretty hard to deal with. So
Yeah.
shambling creatures that can last are really good. The other thing on there, Tormenting Banshee. It's really good combo. The heart of this, though, is what I've been looking something for is the heart tree paired with a tarot, shardplate behemoth, ether root, like getting those paired off onto the heart tree can make those just unstoppable. Or if you can get the camouflage Miobo on the heart tree with the shambling triggers going off and the tarot trigger for life gain going off, you can start getting a really just nasty stealth creature that every other turn is killing a creature and punching damage through. Pterodon Mauler. And then it's just got a really good spell suite on there with the Dizzying Siphon, Necrovive, Soul Reap, and Extract Will. So again, Dizzying Siphon, life gain, triggering the heart tree. Soul Reap can trigger the heart tree twice if he's got a beast, which he does have a demon in there, which is going to be on the field a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to watch out for that. Extract Will, free play. Dizzying Siphon creates a free play. Swamp Moss Lurker is a free play. So not only does it have a really good combo and engine that can just take over a game, it's also got tempo with the free plays, and it's creating that life buffer that the shambling creatures have, along with the Dizzy and Soul Reap. I haven't even got into his Forgeborn yet, and again, looking at this, I'm not sure which one he ran on this. I'm going to guess it's going to be Nova for the bounty life trigger. Nova's Might is always solid. And then two for other minions. Again, of course, if he's going that cycle and he puts onto a heart tree, that's just a breakthrough that's really hard to kill at that point. So I'm guessing most games didn't last to cycle 4 against this deck.
Yeah, I think I'd have to guess with the amount of purple green decks out there that maybe some did, and the only reason I say that is because Aaron's deck doesn't have a ton of breakthrough outside of those and 2 other cards. So I was able to. I went up against Aaron and I was able to chump him for quite a long time, but eventually, when the cards are down, he's gonna get one through. And you mentioned that heart tree is bananas in this deck with the Taro, the Behemoth. It took me forever to kill his level 1 Behemoth, and then by the time he did it, I was still dealing with his level 1 Taro somewhere else that luckily wasn't in a Heart Tree lane. But as soon as I killed his level 1 Behemoth, he dropped the level 2 Taro into that lane. And so the one other thing that I would mention in this deck that is just a looming threat the entire game is Nuede. So basically, her garden is just sitting out there, and every time he gains life, and he gains life by if you get to level 2 of this thing, by putting something in an empty lane, or with the garden, every time you put something in an empty lane, you get a free wisp. Eventually, that's going to flip. And when the garden flips, you end up with this 10-10 breakthrough. And now the really fun thing about his deck is almost the entire time he's got so much health that he controls. Like he'll fill up his board and not flip the Guardian because it's not opportune for him to do so, even though he could do damage. He can just sit and wait for the absolute opportune moment where it's backbreaking. And for me, that was, I think I had like a 32-2 Thundersoar against him, and he flipped it just because he had no other way to remove the Thundersoar. Or it was like a 32-4. It was just enough so the Wisp wasn't going to kill it. He flipped the Oak Guardian, and there was no chance. Like I had spent the whole game getting to that point. But for other players, it can be the moment where it's just too much, a little bit over the top. So Nuede in this deck is really cool, really fun to see, and I love seeing it because she was one of the first Soulbinds I ever saw in set 2, and I actually played it in Fuse Fest in the sealed event. So really cool to see it, and I was telling him I was excited about that. But yeah, this deck, when it fires on all cylinders, is impossible, I think, to keep up with, which is really fun.
Yeah, the other thing you bring up about Heart Tree being, or not, sorry, the Heart Tree, the Nueva's Guardian flip to Oak Guardian, you can wait to trigger that when you need to, and so if you really are controlling the board state, but you're still taking damage on your creatures, you can always wait to flip it until you have a Heart Tree in your hand. So now you can now you've got flip the Nueva's, they have a 10-10 there, put your new Heart Tree down, and now you're just buffing up a 10-10 with Breakthrough to prevent it from dying, which is huge. And then Toxic Ether, we kind of mentioned that just a little bit, but that's just another great card. It's already got 6 attack at cycle 1, so if you're able to keep it alive and get some health gain on it, that can get pretty scary. But again, that one's a little bit harder because it's such a low starting point. It's that Kindred Raptor problem.
Yeah, exactly, and it's very interesting you bring that up. So I was mentioning to Aaron when I saw this deck, it's like, hey, we've seen people do stuff with the Heart Tree. We've seen Shamblers in the Heart Tree. We've seen the Taro in the Heart Tree. That's kind of the initial shock factor that people figured out. But then some people have done the Behemoth a little bit. I don't think nearly as well as this deck does it. But I don't think anyone's ever done it with Ether Root and the Behemoth and the Taro. All those 3 things with the potential for the Heart Tree are really pretty silly. And then, Swamp Moss Lurker on top. Yeah. Like,
the only card it's missing is, like, get rid of the Stout Keeper and put in a Sower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be bananas.
Like, that is it. Like, yeah. Maybe the Ferocious Horde you turn on, but at that point, like, yeah. Like, that's it.
I know Aaron, his eyes go across a lot of decks, but like kudos to him for grabbing this green out and running with it. It is awesome.
I think it was I don't know, 3 or 4. I don't know. It's been a while, but I think I was playing against Aaron, who was doing a similar deck. I don't know if it was this one or not, and I was like, that is amazing, and that's what kind of got me looking, like, wanting to do that. That'd be a lot of fun. So, yeah. Again, shout out to Aaron on that. It was huge. And then I know I forgot what I was gonna say, but anyways, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and yeah.
All right. Well, that being said, let's jump off to the top placing deck, and we can't talk about that without talking about Nate the Weekend, who has been, an absolute pillar of the community from almost the beginning, if not the beginning. He's been around forever. So, from us to him, thanks for everything you've done for Solforge Fusion. He recently announced his departure from the game. He left it open-ended, of course. The chance is always that he could come back. And I would love to play Solforge Fusion with him again sometime. Awesome human being, amazing player. Obviously, this was his send-off. He sold his entire collection as this thing was starting, with the condition that he's allowed to keep these 2 decks until this tournament resolves, and then he would give them to the person who purchased his collection. So I couldn't be happier that he kind of rides off into the sunset, wins this thing as his last Solforge Fusion event, which I said honestly is the most competitive and the last competitive event of the set 1, set 2 meta. So
yeah,
very cool.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, Weekend has done a ton for the community. It's always been great chatting with them and playing with them. Hopefully we'll be able to interact them in this game in the future or another game maybe. But yeah, it was awesome. And yeah, what a mic drop to end on here.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, I mean, the decks in this and the players playing in it is to go out ahead. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and we didn't see RSE crack the top 4, which is pretty impressive, but there were some lights out RSE decks. You name it in the meta, it was in this tournament. And so let's break down this deck here. If you look at the overarching archetype, this is essentially the deck that won Worlds last year. And now I know a lot of people are going to tell me that that's not correct. They're going to come back and say, well, Sam had a corrupt drone. He had a necromancer. He did things differently. Yes, I understand all of that. You can't 1-to-1 in Solforge Fusion. But I'm telling you, this is the archetype. And what Sam did was he had answers to a lot of things. And what Nate's deck's doing here is he has answers to a lot of things. It's done a little bit differently. I would go so far as to say this one is shystier. If that's a word, I think I just added some vowels and an R on the end of that. But this one has a lot more responses and probably has, in my opinion, maybe a lower ceiling than Sam Nathas's deck that won Worlds.
Yeah, I mean the big pieces that are missing is the Mantis Forge Seal, but it does move the AC from 4 to 3, which is what you would want if you're not having those, right? So
yeah. Yep, there's some huge power differences, but the archetype is similar in that I think this one's win con is less often Krogius. Krogius is just sometimes a happenstance in the back pocket that's going to come out, and sometimes it's not needed.
Yep.
But he was running Cersei, Life Drain. You mentioned Army Commander 3. Soul Siphon, we've always said, love it at 2, love it at 4. Don't give it to us at 3. Yep. This kind of checks the box there. And then we joked about this before. We have a tendency to list the cards in the deck and go through every card, but we're going to do it here, Greg, because if you think there's a card that doesn't have a place in this deck, you're probably wrong out there, and that would have been my first impression too. Frankenbaum's probably one of them, but he's probably lesser of the played ones. But a 4/5 early in cycle 1 that puts you a free minion because you played it off Forge last and he survives, that's actually a pretty big swing in cycle 1. So Frankenbaum can be a huge tempo play. Portal Shade, Stealth, which is cool. If you didn't watch the finals, it's out there. I'll throw a link in the description of this. But there was a really cool play at the end of the game where Nate was trying to get lethal on Aaron, and to do that, he threw a Portal Shade out as his first play on Forge. Now, Aaron has to think, okay, does he have removal to get rid of the thing that's blocking my creature in the front lane? Because Portal Shade would give it enough attack to kill me, right? So putting in that thought process into your opponent, I don't know if it changed Aaron's play, but Aaron had to gain enough life to get over that threat, simply because Portal Shade, a level 1 card in cycle 3 was played. First turn on Forge, Aaron maybe had to change the way he was going to play that round, which is very fun to watch. Scourge Hydra, removal, that's amazing. Tormenting, you throw it in a deck, it's scary because people have to at least respect that it's a potential. Right? No one wants to throw an Oak Father out in cycle 3 and have you tormenting Moebit. Vampiric Creeper, the potential to just take 7 life from your opponent. Well, you're taking 2 of it, but 7's going away. And then the big early Shambler, which is great. The big boy, we don't need to talk about Krogius. Hibernating Keeper, in this deck, I think it actually is decent with the 3 beasts. But obviously, it's not the greatest. especially when, one of your three beasts, I would say, is your Vermin, which is really just a toolbox carrier with already a big health stat line. Relentless Wanderers. This is one of those perfect stall cards that's going to get you to that Army Commander 3. Shroudthorn Splicer. I love, love, love this card. Yeah, honestly, probably my favorite card in the game. And that's contending with a lot. But in Cycle 1, it can just break people's backs. And then Cycle 2 and 3, it's all value every step of the way. For most decks. Swamp Moss Lurker. If you were going to name any deck that gains life and is in the top tier of the meta, I will tell you it has to have Swamp Moss Lurker, I believe. You need that free play tempo potential. And then, Group Meal is actually a really solid Army Commander 3 target if you don't have Krogius, and so is Ghastly Renewal. Kind of similar scenario. Just kind of keep things chaining and going. Botanimate for the removal. Primal Surge, Summoning Council, like all solid plays. It's like anytime you play something, this deck has not just potential answers and abilities, but potential answers straight across stat lines, which is also something that most decks can't do very well. Depending on the level, his cards actually split up pretty well, coming across the different stat lines in the levels as you go. So I'm not sure if anything you want to jump into and go. I know I kind of went through every card, but I think there's quite a few people that could potentially look at this deck, especially if they're newer players, and say, I see some good stuff, but I don't know that it's that good. And I'd say, Nate's one of the best players. He was top 4 in Worlds. He's a phenomenal player. But then you really have to break every single one of these down and watch and see how it can answer plays consistently.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. It's just filled with a lot of good cards that are either very good statted, being able to answer, being able to trade, has a toolbox or has an ability to help trigger something else in the deck. So there's a lot of just little synergies going on, and that does take a lot of skill to play those style of decks. There's not, I mean, you could say the Krogius AC is the home run hit for this deck, but that's not, like you said, it's not necessarily the case. There are so many other ways that it just ekes out advantage turn after turn after turn till you get into a hole that's just not really recoverable against this deck, and especially against a very smart player that knows how to answer and make the trades that are necessary. And so when you're winning every turn like that, it gets out of hand. And you mentioned the Portal Shade. Yeah, I really like the Portal Shade. It's a very toolboxy card. You can threaten with it. You can put on the thing. You can set up your Scourge Hydra with it. There's just a lot of different things you can do with this deck. And that's not even the only one, right? We got the Dizzy Siphon, in there. That's huge. And you mentioned it, the AC3 into Group Meal. That's, again, card advantage, card play on there. The Ghastly Renewal can work really well if you just end up dropping the Frankenbomb just so you can get the double reanimate, right, when you have it in Cycle 3. So a lot of little things that you got to pay attention to going against this deck, because it has ways to answer. And when it does answer, it's usually creating not just a direct answer, it's creating it's creating an answer and then an advantage on top of that.
Yeah, it's like the cascading value, just advantage after advantage after advantage. It adds up. Like you said, becomes unrecoverable. So that's kind of a breakdown of the decks. So again, congratulations to Nate. One thing I did want to mention on this deck is I've actually seen this deck. Nate's been playing for a while. He's played this deck in a couple of tournaments. I've played against it before. I remember I see it, and it's named Bizarak Brandon. I love when people name their decks, and quite a few players just pull a piece out of the first, a piece out of the last, and call it that. And that's what this one is, Bizarak Brandon. And every time I see it, I'm like, this isn't Bizarak. This is Dizian. As I get so confused. So I do love that. Probably a tangent that didn't need to be gone on there. But so yeah, and then so that was Nate's deck. Took first. Scuba Toad took second with that awesome Carnivorous Taro deck. And then we have Ben in third, and I kind of squeaked across the bar in fourth there. It was a lot of fun. I do want to throw a huge shout out and a thank you to Sam for running this invitational. This is an absolute ton of work, and the prizes he puts on for his events are absolutely bar none. Honestly, most of it's official Solforge, Fusion, Stoneblade swag, and the amount of prizes he gives out for an event, it blows away any event that I've been to in person. So the prizing structure is amazing. And then he's already on his second invitational. So if you want to see his events, obviously go to Stoneblade Discord. He'll have them dropped. And I'll have some links for you as well to get you introduced to Nathas Gaming events. So I just want to throw that out there, and a big thanks to Sam for running these things. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. Just a quick rundown of that one tournament until we see everyone again. Greg, you got anything?
No, I think I'm good. Looking forward to seeing everybody again at Gen Con.
Good point. We'll be there in and around the tables. I'm taking part in the storyline event. Excited to see some people. So hopefully we'll see you before then and see you on the Discord. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for attending this lesson of the Forgeborn Finishing School. If you liked this video, please subscribe, comment, or consider donating to our Patreon account. We look forward to our next lesson.